Chicago Fire Season 13 makes it clear that NBC is getting rid of the wrong Firehouse 51 members. After Chicago Fire Season 13, Episode 19, it becomes clear that NBC is getting rid of the wrong Firehouse 51. As one of the longest-running shows on broadcast TV, One Chicago is no stranger to cast reshuffles. Over the years, it has gone through multiple cast changes for various reasons. Some of them were initiated by the actors. Other times, they were for story or cost-cutting purposes. Despite its fairly regular occurrence, it is always tricky to say goodbye to any character, especially those who have been in the show for a relatively long time. While Gaffney Medical and Intelligence have both said goodbye to several personnel in the last couple of years, Firehouse 51 arguably has had more cast changes. Original characters such as Matt Casey and Chief Wallace Bowden both left the crew, alongside longtime members, including Blake Gallo and Sylvie Brett. Even newcomers like Roman Flynn were unexpectedly written out of the series. As Chicago Fire Season 13 inches closer to its end, Firehouse 51 is once again saying goodbye to two characters, but the series itself proves that this is the wrong move. As reported, Jake Lockett and Daniel Keary are leaving Chicago Fire as Sam Carver and Ritter. The news came not long after the 2025 One Chicago crossover, the first special event for the Windy City Set franchise where both played a part in. The actors have already confirmed that they will be ending their respective stints by the end of the year, although they remain tight-lipped about how they are going to be written out. In relation to that, neither NBC nor Wolf Entertainment has revealed any new information about their final plots either. Sadly, there hasn't been any kind of setup on how their exits would go. Considering how Chicago Fire Season 12 finale wrote out Bowden, it's safe to say that the writers would keep things close to the chest until they have no choice but to set the narrative in motion. Eamon Walker's longtime Firehouse 51 chief had a last-minute promotion, paving the way for his departure. For what it's worth, the official synopsis for the Chicago Fire Season 13 finale, "It had to end this way," doesn't feature any kind of reference to either Ritter or Carver's respective departures. In the grand scheme of things, Ritter and Carver are supporting characters to a massive ensemble. The main focus of Chicago Fire remains to be Taylor Kinney and Miranda Mayo's co-worker and lovers, Kelly Severide and Stella Kidd, and aptly so, considering that they are the heart of the show. However, this doesn't mean that Lockett and Keary's characters don't have their own appeal. Over the years, they have had their personal arcs interlaced with the ongoings at Firehouse 51. Both have also developed close relationships with the rest of Dom Pascal's squad. Regardless of how Chicago Fire writes out Carver and Ritter, the fact that they are getting booted out is a big mistake, and Season 13, Episode 19, Birds of Prey proves that. In the outing, both characters get interesting storylines that have the potential to lead to fun and compelling narrative in the long run. For starters, Ritter has opened up his house to Lizzie Novak. Firehouse 51 hasn't featured a substantial roommate plot since Otis Vonseck, Joe Cruz, and Brett shared an apartment. Seeing Ritter and Lizzie develop a different relationship outside work would make Chicago Fire more dynamic. Secondly, as Carver returns, he teams up with Violet McCamey for an unusual follow-up on a call. The pair has been a burgeoning couple for a while now, but the Chicago Fire Season 12 finale cut their romance short after a misunderstanding. That push and pull continued in the new year, and it didn't help that Carver was going through his own personal issues with alcohol. After a stint in rehab, it's nice to see him and Violet reconnect, with their plot in Birds of Prey organically rebuilding their relationship until they admit their true feelings for each other. Because of how much the cast of Chicago Fire has changed over the years, there's an understandable fondness for characters who have been on the show for a long time. Firehouse 51 members like Mouch McColland, Christopher Herman, Kid and Severide have been a staple of the One Chicago franchise, so there's already emotional investment in them, which is arguably the primary motivation of avid viewers. That being said, Chicago Fire also needs to evolve, and they can't do that by relying on the same characters over and over again. This doesn't mean that it should get rid of the aforementioned actors and replace them with new ones. However, they must also make sure that they are developing brand new players that people can follow. This way, the show can remain fresh, while also ensuring that its fan base isn't only devoted to a small circle of Firehouse 51 members. Ritter and Carver could be a part of that new wave of characters that people can follow in the foreseeable future, and Chicago Fire Season 13. Episode 19 proves that both still have many stories left to tell. After a relatively long wait, NBC has already renewed One Chicago, which means that Firehouse 51 will definitely be back for Chicago Fire Season 14. Sadly, it's highly unlikely that the decision on Carver and Ritter's immediate future will change. Since both actors have not said that they are leaving on their own accord, it's possible that they are being written out of the series as part of the cost-cutting measures that also resulted in cast rotation all throughout the year. Beyond their upcoming exits, however, it's curious if Chicago Fire can consider bringing back either Ritter or Carver. At this point, seeing them both back and reinstated as series regulars is simply improbable. Chicago Fire doesn't really bring back departing characters unless it's for a guesting stint, which is what happened when Casey returned for his wedding to Brett and Bowden to investigate the fire that injured Benny Severide's secret son, Jack Damon. Unless something changes, that's going to be the extent of the pair's future in the show, which is a shame. In its 12th season, Chicago Fire continues to be a ratings juggernaut for NBC, but not without sparking controversy among its most loyal fans. The series has always thrived on the heat of emergency calls and the even hotter interpersonal drama of Firehouse 51. But lately, the flames on screen aren't the only ones burning. Off-screen decisions have ignited a firestorm of criticism. It's becoming painfully clear that NBC is getting rid of the wrong members of Firehouse 51, and the viewers aren't taking it lightly. Let's be honest, Firehouse 51 isn't just a place. It's a family. Fans have grown deeply attached to the characters, watching them evolve through tragedy, triumph, and everything in between. So when key players start disappearing under the guise of creative direction or contractual changes, the audience notices. And they're not happy. The recent departures of beloved characters like Blake Gallo and Darren Ritter have sent shockwaves through the fandom. Both men represented the heart of the younger generation at 51, Gallo with his wild enthusiasm and bravery, and Ritter with his quiet resilience and steadfast support of his team. These weren't just filler characters. They were the emotional glue between the veterans and the rookies. They brought balance, heart, and an authentic sense of camaraderie. Now their absence feels like a gaping hole that even the sirens of Engine 81 can't drown out. NBC's decision to shift the spotlight away from these emotionally invested characters feels misguided. What's even more confusing is who's still being given screen time despite weaker storylines or questionable chemistry with the core cast. Some newer additions feel like puzzle pieces that don't quite fit, either too underdeveloped or inserted into plots that feel manufactured. Instead of investing in developing characters organically, it sometimes seems like the show is trying to force a new dynamic that simply isn't clicking. And then there's the issue of sidelining the veterans. Take Joe Cruz, for instance. Once one of the show's most emotionally rich characters, Cruz has recently been relegated to the background, often reduced to a few one-liners and quick scenes that don't do justice to the depth we know he's capable of. We watched him mourn the loss of Otis, grow into a father, and struggle with leadership roles. His arc was beautifully human. Why push someone like him aside in favor of more hollow, flashy plot devices? The truth is, Chicago Fire works best when it lets its characters breathe, stumble, grow, and connect. When it focuses too much on rotating in new faces to replace the old without giving them time to establish meaningful roots, it loses its emotional weight. Audiences don't just want explosions and daring rescues. They want to care about the people behind the masks and hoses. They want that unique Firehouse 51 magic that makes us feel like we're part of the squad.